So welcome to BODHI MAGGA today, the 3rd of January, the first session in 2025, BODHI MAGGA, or the Path to Awakening. Our mission is for our participants to develop mindfulness, sati, unification of mind, samadhi, and wisdom, panya, through practice of stillness and insight bhavana techniques. We also spend time understanding and practicing the Dhamma, the wider Dhamma, to follow the Noble Eightfold Path for liberation from dukkha. Our aim is to gather every first Friday of the month from 6 to 8 p.m. UK via Skype. And in 2025, this year, we will spend the full year exploring the 7 factors of awakening. And thank you very much, Paul, for this wonderful suggestion that we're taking forward this year. So we commence our sessions generally with a warm welcome to all of you who are joining, an introduction to the session, after which we will have in-session practice meditation, a Dhamma talk, a Q&A session, although today, the way Paul will manage the session, the Q&A will be more interactive rather than a separate session. And then we will close around 8 o'clock. So the theme today is an overview of the 7 factors of awakening, or the Saptha Bojjhanga. Paul will talk about what they are and how crucial they are for stream entry. You're very familiar with Paul now. I think he's been with us for a few years, leading our Dhamma talks and meditation practice. And also we met him in person during the retreat we had a few months ago. So Paul has practiced meditation for over 20 years in various monasteries, in caves and kutis across Europe, US, and Asia, with many leading Theravada teachers. He has a wide knowledge of the suttas as well as of the Theravada meditative traditions. He is now continuing his 12-year journey of optimizing his life for the practice of Dhamma, and he's bringing his insight and wisdom to us today. So we really look forward to that. And I will now stop sharing my screen and kindly invite Paul to commence the session today. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks so much, Gihanta. Can you hear me okay? Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic.
Yes, Paul.
So yeah, thank you so much, Gihanta. That was very sweet of you. What we're going to do today and why we're going to do it is I spent some time reflecting for myself on the path itself, and especially on the aspects of Dhamma that get talked about quite a bit and those that get talked about less in certain ways. So by way of example, quite often we'll hear a Dhamma talk on the 5 hindrances, or quite often we'll hear a talk on mindfulness, even on the fullest expression of mindfulness, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. But more rarely we'll hear a talk or go on a retreat even, which is dedicated to the factors of awakening. And for reasons that we're going to talk about, this is huge because there are several discourses throughout the canon where both the Buddha and some of the other disciples talk about the factors of awakening. And the bottom line is, it is literally impossible to get awakened, to reach liberation, to reach even the first stage of liberation, stream entry, without bringing these factors of awakening into the mind without really developing and cultivating them. So they are very, very much of the essence. There's a wonderful discourse. It's a conversation actually between Ananda and somebody called Uttiya. And Uttiya is talking about people who reach liberation. And he's asking Ananda, how does the Buddha know how they became liberated? And Ananda gives this simile. So if you can imagine a castle, and this castle or this fort is extremely well fortified. So there is no way that even a cat can find its way in unless it's actually allowed in. So there's only one entry to this fort, and that's like the main gate, so you can't get in any other way. And this fort has a very well-trained watchman. So the watchman knows, because in this fort, there's no way in or out except through the main gate. He knows exactly who has come in and who has come out. So Ananda gives this same simile, that in the same way as the watchman knows there is only this way in, and therefore I know as a watchman who's come into the castle, in the same way one can know who has attained liberation by observing in a very particular way. And so I'll just read you what he says. In the same way, the Tathagata, the Buddha, is not concerned as to whether all those beings in samsara, or all those beings who have attained liberation, or half of them, or even a third of them, have been liberated by means of his Dhamma. He knows this instead. All those who have been led, or are being led, or will be led to liberation from samsara have done so, or are doing so, or will do so after having abandoned the 5 hindrances, those defilements that weaken wisdom, having well established the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and having developed, as they have come to be, the 7 factors of awakening. So 3 things. In order to get liberated, Ananda is saying, and there are other discourses where the Buddha says the same thing, Sariputta says the same thing. In order to get liberated, 3 things have to happen. You have to abandon the hindrances, you have to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and you have to cultivate and develop the 7 factors of awakening. And in a sense, it's that simple. And as we all know from practice, there's a lot to that. One very important way of thinking about the factors of awakening is that they are the opposite, in a sense, to the hindrances. So the Buddha talks about the hindrances, which we're all familiar with, the 5 that we're all so familiar with in our practice. So first of all, kamacchanda, so that sense pleasure craving, where the mind is clouded by desire. And you probably remember the simile, the Buddha gives. So if you're trying to look through water, so supposing you're looking at looking at a little pond, you're trying to look down to the bottom of the pond. When the mind is clouded by desire, by sense pleasure desire, it's as if the water has been tainted with dye, like red dye. So you can imagine somebody's poured like turmeric into the water or something. That's what it looks like. So in the same way, when that's happened, you can't see the bottom of the water. That's how the mind is, when it's clouded with desire, with kamacchanda. So that's the first hindrance. So we've all seen that in our practice, right? We're sitting there meditating, and thoughts of, this chocolate at the bar that we'd really love come into the mind, or oh gosh, it's a bit cold in here actually. I'd like to be warm, so I'm going to go and get my blanket and wrap myself up nicely. So sense desire obstructs the mind, it clouds the mind. So when that's in the mind, like all of the hindrances, the mind can't see. It can't see clearly. And then the second one, which again we're also familiar with, ill will. And you may remember the simile the Buddha gives. So that same little lake, same little pond. This time, imagine it's being boiled. There's a fire underneath it, and the water's boiling, and you get bubbles on the surface. You know what it's like when you're cooking, and you've got the heat turned up really high, and there's just bubbles absolutely everywhere. So in the same way, it's impossible to see down through the water because of the bubbles, because of all the heat. That's how the mind is when it's full of ill will. So again, it's completely obstructed through this particular force of mind, ill will. And then the third hindrance, again, also familiar with it, the Pali Tina Mita, as you know, it's usually translated as a sloth and torpor, these kind of 16th century words. So really that's like heaviness of mind, sleepiness of mind, lethargy, these kinds of things, you know, like we're meditating and kind of nodding, like falling asleep. It also manifests as kind of like, oh, I can't be bothered kind of mind, you know, that sort of mind. So that also heavily obstructs wisdom. And the simile the Buddha gives here is that the water in this case has got algae in it. So you know what it's like when you go to a park and you see a pond and there's just like this green algae all over it and you can't see down through it. Same thing. And then the fourth hindrance is kind of like the opposite of that, which is the restlessness and remorse, without shakukacha. And here, again, it obstructs the mind, it weakens wisdom. And the simile the Buddha gives, again, which you probably heard plenty of times, is how there's like wind. So you know what it's like when you get a strong wind whipping across water, and it kind of makes a lot of ripples. So the same thing, when the mind is kind of whipped by agitation, by restlessness, you can't see. So that's the fourth hindrance, which weakens wisdom. And then the fifth one, which in some ways is the most challenging to deal with, which is doubt, vicikiccha. And the Buddha defines it in different ways, in different suttas. Sometimes he talks about it where we're just not sure whether what's arising is wholesome or unwholesome. So that there's confusion. There's confusion about what is skillful and what is unskillful in the mind. That's one manifestation of doubt. Another manifestation is doubt about the teacher. You know, so, or I think all of us have a lot of confidence in the Buddha as a teacher, but some people, especially people who are new to the Dhamma, who are maybe not culturally Buddhist, they think, oh yeah, so I think I'd really love to listen to the Buddha, and then maybe the practice is tough. So, you know, a couple of years later, we start looking at some Shri, somebody or other, some other teacher, some Vedanta teacher, some, you know, guru this or guru that. So the mind starts looking for other teachers because there's doubt about the teacher. Or sometimes it can be doubt about ourselves. Like, can I do this? Maybe this is too tough for me. So doubt can manifest in different ways. And the simile the Buddha gives here is that the water that you're trying to look down through is muddy, very, very muddy. Or even in actual darkness. You know what it's like? Imagine you go out at night and you go to a park and you know there's water there, you know there's a little lake there, but can you see the bottom? No, because it's dark. That's what doubt does to the mind. So these hindrances, I think probably all of us are well familiar with in our practice. And these obsess the mind, not just when we're trying to sit down to meditate, but actually as we go through our daily lives. You know, if you watch the mind as you go through your life day to day, these hindrances arise all the time, pretty much. So they're obstructing the mind, they're obstructing our ability to actually see. So the opposite of these is the 7 factors of awakening. So in contrast to obstructing, to blinding the mind, to making making wisdom weak, the factors of awakening, the 7 factors of awakening, brighten the mind, they strengthen the mind, They make it possible to actually see how things are, to see what is skillful, what is not skillful, and ultimately to see the nature of everything, to see the nature of life, to see what's really going on. And through that seeing, the heart purifies, and through that purification, liberation ultimately. So the factors of awakening are absolutely critical to, well, really to life. I mean, if you want to lead a good life, they're critical to that. And even deeper than that, for all of us, for those of us who are dedicated to stream entry in the way that the Buddha said we should be, given the nature of samsara, developing these factors is really of the essence. I was looking through the suttas actually before this call, and I wanted to read to you a few things, some of the things the Buddha said about this. So, monks, and when the Buddha's addressing the monks, you know, for us, there's the monks and there's nuns, and really he's addressing all of us. He's addressing the entire sangha. So he's not addressing just, you know, men who are in rows, but this is very, very of the essence to all of us. I do not see even one thing that, when developed and cultivated, leads to the abandoning of the things that fetter so effectively as this, the 7 factors of enlightenment. This word fetter, you know, we've all come across it many times, you know, reading the suttas. Again, it's a bit of an ancient word, and, you know, and to us in the 21st century, it's like, well, what are fetters? If you Google fetters and you look at pictures of fetters, it's actually pretty shocking. So really throughout history, and actually they're used even today, fetters are usually these iron, these pieces of iron that are used to punish and to make sure that people can't move, they can't run, they can't do anything. So you can have fetters, these irons, for example, around your wrists. So you can't, can you imagine, like, you can't actually move your arms at all because they're bound by iron. Or you can have fetters around your ankles, so you can't move your feet at all around your legs. Or you can be fettered to a wall. So you can imagine having irons around your arms, and then the metal goes through the wall. So you're completely bound. You're completely imprisoned. So you have no bodily movement at all. Just how awful that would be for 5 minutes, let alone for hours, let alone for days, let alone for you know, for weeks. It would be horrendous, right? It would just be, it's unimaginable. But these are used, they have been used in prisons throughout history, and even today, like there are the places in the world where these are used. So the Buddha uses this word fetter. It's a dramatic word. So he's saying that there are particular forces of mind, and particularly craving and particularly ignorance, which fetter us. They bind us in the same way to ultimately to suffering. And it's very, very helpful for the practice to actually spend some time dwelling on the impact of what he's saying, on what fettering actually means. Okay, so let me read you another couple. The 7 factors of enlightenment, when developed and cultivated, are noble and emancipating. So they're freeing, they're noble and they're freeing. They lead the one who acts upon them to the complete destruction of suffering. So even at a sort of very day-to-day level, the suffering that all of us go through and have gone through in our lives, you know, so we've all experienced some levels of suffering, even in these relatively pleasant lives that most of us, so I think most of us have had in the human realm, where we've suffered aging, a lot of us. Many of us have suffered sickness, sometimes severe sickness. Some of us, I think most of us, have suffered loss of loved ones. We've all suffered loss in other ways, you know, through work, where career things go wrong, we lose jobs. We've all suffered in many, many ways, even just in this lifetime. And this is just a tiny, 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 tiny snapshot of what we've been through, like an unimaginably tiny amount of the suffering we've been through. And so the Buddha is saying these 7 factors of awakening are so powerful that when we act on them and we develop them, they free us from all of these many, many aspects of suffering. Okay, just one more. Then a certain monk approached the Blessed One and said to him, "Sir, venerable sir, it is said, an unwise fool, in what way, sir, is one called an unwise fool?" And the Buddha replied to him, "It is because one has not developed and cultivated the 7 factors of awakening that one is called an unwise fool." Powerful, eh? And then he said, and then the monk who came to him said, "Sir, one who is wise and alert, in what way is one called wise and alert?" And the Buddha says, "It is because one has developed and cultivated the 7 factors of enlightenment that one is called wise and alert." So that's a big deal. So if we want to be, we don't want to be a fool, we want to be wise, we need to develop these 7 factors of awakening. All right. Now, really, the 7 factors of awakening are, they're so deep and they're so subtle, and there's so much to say. We could do like a several-year course on this. So today we're going to do just very much an overview. I was sort of, the analogy that came to mind is, suppose somebody said to us, listen, everybody, there's this wonderful, wonderful property that you should go and live in. If you go and live in there, then all of the problems that you've had with your current one of space and anything will be solved. This is just like a fantastic place. So what's the first thing you do? You probably go on the internet, right? You look at some photos. It's like, oh wow, actually this is amazing. And maybe you might get interested to jump in the car and do a drive-by. So this is a little bit like this today. We're going to do a little bit of a kind of looking at the photos and a drive-by. And then over the coming months, we're going to do the equivalent of actually going to the property and actually looking at the door, looking through the rooms and having in-depth chats with the real estate agent and all of that. Okay, so what we're going to do, if you have, I've talked about this on a few times now, the value of writing things down and the value in particular of having a Dharma diary or a Dharma journal. So journaling, for those of you who haven't done it, Dharma journaling is just immensely, immensely useful. It has several purposes. So one is as a record of your practice in terms of what you found really works for you and also what doesn't work. And the Buddha actually spoke about this, not about journaling specifically, but actually about the importance of really becoming aware of what works and what doesn't work for you. You may have come across in the Dhamma what's called the Sappurisa Dhamma. So the Sappurisa Dhamma is the Dhamma of being an excellent person, a wise person. And one of the qualities of an excellent person that the Buddha talks about is somebody who knows themselves. And what he means by that is knowing both those qualities of mind on the dark side, particularly like, for example, the hindrances, which particularly afflict your mind, and also knowing on the bright side which ones are relatively easy for you to bring forth. But also knowing on the bright side which ones are weak and which ones you really need to develop. So actually, if you haven't started this already, I very, very strongly urge you to create a Dhamma diary, a Dhamma journal for yourself. I've got lots of them on my shelf, and so over the years I've filled up quite a few. So what I recommend is a dedicated journal. Some people prefer to do it digitally, on an iPad. You create an actual like a sort of like a Word document, and keep it filed somewhere nicely, in your Google Drive or whatever you use. So you totally can do it that way, whatever works for you. The important thing is that it's something which in your mind is easy for you to access, easy for you to add to, easy for you to work with frequently. So a Dhamma diary, a Dhamma journal. And one of the reasons why I'm mentioning it now is we're going to do a couple of little exercises. And if you already have a Dhamma diary or Dhamma journal, this would be a great thing to write in it. If you don't, and you can put your hands on some paper and pen, that would be very, very good. And another purpose for the Dhamma diary is to keep a record of what Dhamma you hear that really inspires you. So these can be particular suttas, they can be particular verses, they can be, jatakas, birth stories. Perhaps you like looking at, the udana, the inspired utterances, these very sort of short, pithy dhammas, or the Itivuttaka. Any of these, maybe you like looking at the Dhammapada, these sort of very, very concise dhammas, but things when you read them or when you hear them, they go to your heart. And to start, if you haven't already, to start keeping a record of these things, because it will serve for you as a beautiful treasure trove for your path that you can access continually, whenever you need to, as inspiration. So whether your practice is dipping a little bit and you feel you need some inspiration for the heart, or it's going well, and you just know from experience that these particular suttas, this particular kind of dhamma, when you read it, when you listen to it, you can feel the heart rise up. You can feel inspiration. But so basically the awakening factors strengthen through reading or hearing this dhamma. Okay, so in your Dhamma diary, what we're going to do is a little self-knowledge. We're going to use it as a little kind of like a self-diagnostic, if that makes sense. So we're actually going to fulfill the Buddha's instruction of knowing ourselves in this particular way. Okay, so if you could write on the piece of paper or in your Dhamma diary, or if you don't have anything to hand, you can do this mentally as well. At the top of the page, hindrances. If you want to write the Pali Nivarana, which whatever works for you. And what we're going to do is to go through them one by one. And what we're doing is looking in our heart and asking ourselves, when I look through my daily life, so is this both in your daily life as you're going through whatever you do, to the extent that you've been able to watch the mind through your daily life, and certainly in your practice, what you've observed in your meditation when you sit or you walk or whatever kind of practice you do. We're actually going to score on a scale of 1 to 5 the relative strength of each of the 5 hindrances for ourselves. Because for all of us, there's like 10 of us on this call, the hindrances will affect us differently. Some of us, our minds are more afflicted by craving. Some of us, the mind is more prone to ill will, to aversion. Some of us are more prone to delusion, and the last 3 hindrances, so sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse, and doubt, all have delusion as a root. So generally speaking, for all of us, different hindrances affect us more or less strongly, depending on a whole bunch of things. So it's very, very good to start to understand which ones they are. All right. So under hindrances, if you write the first hindrance, so sensual desire, kamachanda, sensual desire. So what we're looking at here is how prone is my mind to craving, to desire for those things around me in my life. So that can include really anything that arises. For example, there may be particular things that we love to see, particular sights that we love to see. Like if you look around in your room, in the room that you're in, there may be particular bits of furniture, there may be particular decorations that when you look at it, your mind has attachment to those things. Can actually be people as well. When you see particular people, so something arises at the eye base, a particular person, and like, oh wow, you can feel the pull there. So anything where at the eye base, that's a good place to start looking, which is attractive, and you just know that repeatedly that is a source of attraction. One way to actually diagnose it for yourself is, if this were taken away from me and I couldn't actually see this anymore, would that be a source of suffering for me? And that's a good way to test whether there's actually desire for these particular things. So sights, and then think about sound. What things do I like hearing? And in my meditation practice, can I think of like particular thoughts like that come up? So it could be music. That's a classic one, but not at all restricted to that. So the sound of particular people's voices is actually quite interesting. Quite often, actually, when we like spending time with people, it's actually the sound of their voice, which is attractive. There's a particular like timbre of the voice, particular like a register of the voice. It might be like higher or lower voice, but it's just lovely to listen to. Okay, and then again, so still looking at sensual desire, anything that that the mind likes to smell. So this food is an obvious one, but this is not at all restricted to food. Sometimes there are places outside, you go to a particular park or somewhere, and it's just like the odor, the smell of the grass or the flowers. There can be particular other fragrances, like around the house, you might like to burn particular incenses. Sometimes, like a freshly painted room, that can be attractive. Just anything like that where there's desire. When you smell a particular thing, perfumes are like a classic one. The smell of particular clothes, like if you have a particular favorite clothing, sometimes it's not just the touch, it's actually the smell of it. There's attachment to that. And again, just reflecting back over your practice, when you're meditating, if you can think of any particular habits of thought, where a particular smell, something you were attracted to through smell might arise. Okay, and then also to think about the tongue flavor, any particular flavors where you just know there is sensual desire. Food is obviously a very big one here. Drink, plenty of drinks. You hear certain people. I've got one in mind who says, I really need a Bailey's right now. So it's like, the craving for that sweetness, the sweetness of the drink. So food and drink in particular, lollipops, anything like that. Okay, and then also in Kama Chanda, in sensual desire, particularly anything at the fifth sense base, which is the body. Particular chairs you like sitting on, that's always a good one. When you sit to do your meditation, are there particular zafus that your mind's like, oh yeah, I know, I want that one? Particular cushions that you always choose when you sit down. Particular clothes that you wear because your mind likes the feel of the cloth. Particular things that you like putting on your bed, like sheets or something, again, because the mind likes that feel. And finally, but certainly not leastly, the mind. When you dwell on your mind, when you bring mindfulness to the kind of thoughts that you think through the day, do you notice any kinds of thoughts that the mind is continually drawn to? Particular memories of the past, fantasies of the future, often related to people, but not necessarily. Other experiences, holidays you've been on, anything where the mind is like, yes. Or if perhaps if you sit down and you're looking at a holiday brochure and you watch the mind, it's like, okay, well, what is it trying to do here? It's trying to get pleasurable experience here. So, and where is that happening right now? At the mind base. Okay, so this is sensual desire, kama chanda. And this, as I was saying earlier, this afflicts us during the day, normal days, and when we sit down and practice. You know, when you're doing anapanasati or whatever kind of practice you do, and the mind starts getting pulled by certain thoughts of desire. So on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is this hardly afflicts you at all, you have a mind that just, nah, it's like, nah, I don't really see much craving there. And 5 is really strong. Yes, I can see that these kind of thoughts obsess my mind. During the day, I can see that they draw me here and there, and it's dictating a lot about my activity. When I sit down and I do my classical practice, yes, my mind is continually being assaulted with these kind of thoughts. So that would be a 5 in this particular scale. Okay, good. So that's kama chanda, sensual desire. Right. So whatever number you gave that, we're going to go to the next one, which is ill will. Vyapada. So ill will manifests in lots of different ways. You know, that sort of hostility of mind. Most obviously in anger, irritation, annoyance, and it has that quality of in the Abhidhamma, the quality is like ferociousness, which is quite interesting. You know, like if somebody's done something you don't like, and if you look at the anger that comes up, it has that quality of fierceness. So even though we might not say anything, we might not do anything, but in the mind, it's like, you know, you want to punch the person. It has that ferocity to it. And it doesn't have to be a person. It can be, you know, you're trying to boot your computer up and it's doing silly things. And again, aversion, ill will towards the computer arises. It has the same hostility, the same anger, ill will. Now, a way to diagnose this for yourself is the simile the Buddha gave of asking yourself, which kind of snake are you? So imagine a poisonous snake. Now, there are 4 types of snake in this particular simile. So one type of snake is a snake which is quick to strike. You know, so you see the snake and then bam, it strikes really, really quickly. And there's another type of snake that will kind of look and look and look, but it won't strike. It'll be very, very slow to strike. So in this, if you look at your own mind, if you look at how you react to situations, when somebody's saying something that your mind finds annoying, does anger come up very quickly? Or does your mind tend to say, even when they're speaking angrily or they're saying stuff which other people find irritating or anger inducing, your own mind tends to stay calm for quite a long time. You know, so are you slow to anger or quick to anger? So those are 2 of the types of snake. The other 2 types of snake are to do with the intensity of the venom. So there's a type of snake where the venom is quite weak. So it bites, but it doesn't affect you very much. So the venom just disappears from the body quite quickly. There's another type of snake where when they bite and when they inject you with poison, that stays in the body for a long, 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 long time. So the Buddha is saying it's the same with ill will. You know, sometimes the nature of our character is that we'll get angry, we'll get upset, but it will go pretty quickly. It'll just kind of like dissipate. But another type of person, when we get angry, it will burn with resentment for a long time. You know, if you're the kind of person who, like, somebody did something to you 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 30 years ago, and you can still think about it and you're still angry with them, that's that kind of snake. So if you are slow to anger, slow to annoyance, slow to irritation, and when it does arise, it just goes very, very quickly, that's a 1. You're going to be a 1 on this scale. But if you're quick to anger, or when the anger does arise, it really sticks around, and you go around carrying a lot of resentments, you're going to be a 5 on this particular scale. Okay, good. Number 3, Tina Mita, sloth and torpor. Okay, so again, if you think back through, if you reflect on your day-to-day life, if you notice you tend to be sleepy a lot, you have your nice lunch, and you sit back and, within 5 minutes you can feel your eyelids drooping, and, or, in the evenings, maybe you've had quite a long day and you sit on the sofa and feel yourself nodding off very, very quickly. Or when you sit down to meditate, usually within a few minutes, there's not a lot of mindfulness going on because you're asleep. So in all of those cases, you're going to score that high. But if you have the kind of mind that just tends to be alert a lot of the time, there's a lot of energy in the mind, and also in the body, and sleepiness doesn't really afflict you, that's going to be a 1. All right, now the opposite. The 4th hindrance is restlessness and remorse. So the udacha, the restlessness, that agitation, where the mind, if you have the kind of mind where, either in your classical practice, you sit down to meditate and, just this thoughts of, oh my God, I've got this and this and this to do. And my to-do list is just crazy today. And oh no, I forgot to do this thing last week. And oh, there's Auntie Jo, I should have called her. And there's just a lot of that kind of stuff going on. The mind is agitated. You look at your bank statement, it's like, oh man, I can't believe this. Those kind of things, agitation. And how agitation is it's very unpleasant. It's kind of like, it's sort of like being beaten, or sort of whipped repeatedly. And then the counterpart, the other aspect of it is remorse, particularly where we think back to things that we did and think, oh God, I wish I hadn't done that, or things that we didn't do that we wish we had done. I really wish I'd taken a present to that person. Yeah, or, what was I thinking? Or oh, I can't believe I said that. Things like that. So remorse, particularly when I see there's not very good, sometimes that will certainly can create remorseful thoughts. But if you find your practice is afflicted by these kind of things, or your day-to-day life, then you're going to score this high. This is going to be a 4 or a 5 for you. All right, and then doubt. So if you find yourself quite often thinking, I'm not sure whether I'm doing the right practice. Yeah, I might, wow, I heard these instructions, but maybe they're not the right instructions. I keep trying to follow the breath and it's not working. Maybe I should be doing metta, and then you do like 5 minutes of metta. This isn't working. Gosh, maybe I should be doing something else. So the mind is just kind of moved around by doubt. Then you're going to score this high. And doubt is quite insidious in the mind, because when it gets strong, we stop making effort, we stop practicing. Because if you start thinking, when there are thoughts in the mind that something's not working or is not going to work, what does it do? How motivated are you? Not very, right? So it really erodes efforts. So when there's a lot of doubt in the mind, that's bad news. Okay, so before we go any further, it'd be very good to hear what your thoughts on that. What did you score? So somebody wouldn't mind kicking off, sharing. So for each of the 5 hindrances, what did you score it, and why? So what did you see about your own mind that led you to score it in that particular way? So anybody? And I'll just preface it actually just by before we do that, and I think this goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. There's no right and there's no wrong. That's it's not like if you scored everything 1, that's fantastic, and if you scored everything 5, that's terrible. All of these forces afflict all of us, until we're very, very, very deep in the practice, and ultimately some of these things like restlessness don't even go until complete liberation, until arahantship. So these are really, really, really deep forces that have caused us suffering since beginningless time, literally, not just in this lifetime. So yeah, so there's not only is there no shame in, if you scored everything 5, not only is there no shame in that, but actually it's wonderful that the mind can see it, if that is the case for you. And there's a beauty in seeing it, number one, and then being able to share it. You know, there's a wonderful, because it's valuable for everybody, it's valuable for all of us. You know, when we can share what we see in our own mind, when we can see the defilements and how they show up, because everybody learns from it, because these afflict all of us, you know, without exception. Okay, so sorry, I was about to interrupt. I'd interrupted somebody who was about to share. Mihiri, have you had that?
Yeah, I'm happy to go ahead. I mean, so looking at the what is sort of highest for me, I scored craving and desire the highest, because you know there are certain things that I do crave for, and the intensity is quite high. It could be certain aims, but it could be certain things that I enjoy consuming, certain things that I enjoy experiencing. So I have quite intensity with the desire and the craving. And then of course the other one is the restlessness, you know, agitation with. I always would like certain things to happen a certain way, and so I could be quite restless if it doesn't happen, or say, and maybe there could be remorse in relation to if something didn't quite happen the way I wanted it, you know. So again, that's fairly high, but not as high as the desire aspect. Ill will came sort of medium. I mean, I can get quite hostile, maybe with a on certain occasions, but in general, I think I'm sort of midway there. Maybe there's a certain person or sometimes a certain situation that might cause hostility in my mind, but it's not as intense. I feel relatively to the craving aspect. Again, I scored sloth and torpor sort of in the middle. It all again depends on, I guess, if I'm interested in something, I'm quite alert, quite keen. If I'm not interested in something, then yes, I could be quite lazy in my approach. But so I sort of scored it medium. Doubt was sort of where I think I scored relatively lower, like a 2. You know, just yeah. So that was sort of my way of scoring. So clearly, what you know, the desire aspect is something that I know can quite cloud my day-to-day, as well as sort of the restlessness aspects.
Superb. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. I can see some hands up. That's wonderful. Anupama.
Hi, Paul. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Sure. So I scored myself the highest on sensual desire, like Gihanta. So I gave myself a 4 out of 5. Yeah, I think I like sights, sounds, smells, and things. I can clearly see that in my day-to-day life. Kind of, yeah, music, those kind of things I'm, I suppose, crave. Things like, I suppose, flavors you spoke about. Yes, I do, but maybe not so much as the others. I think I've made a conscious effort recently to be mindful about, yeah, things like what I eat and drink. In terms of sloth and torpor, Tina Midda, I scored myself 3 out of 5. But interestingly, I find this really varies. Again, I've been doing some lifestyle changes, especially recently, and I find it depends on how much I've eaten or what I've eaten, or yeah, I don't know whether you've experienced this yourself.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, a classic example is I've just been to Sri Lanka and back, and in Sri Lanka, I tend to get fed a lot more and eat a lot more, and really did suffer from sloth and torpor while there. And I was thinking, it's really difficult for me to not have a nap, or difficult concentrating on reading a book, etc., etc. So I find there is a clear connection with my lifestyle and how much I've indulged in certain ways that affect my presence of mind. So that's that. Now, interestingly, ill will, restlessness, remorse, and doubt or Vichikicha, I scored myself 2 out of 5 for all three. Just a note about Uddachukukucha, or restlessness, remorse. I find I am a restless individual, but I don't so much notice remorse. Would you say remorse is equal to regretting about the past? Is that the same or different?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, they are generally synonyms. I'm just trying to think if there's much difference. Yeah, it's really to do with things in the past, either that we did that we wish we hadn't done, or that we didn't do that we wish we had done.
Sure. I don't tend to dwell on the past. So yeah, that's why I scored it a 2 out of 5. But if it was just restlessness, maybe I'd probably be a 3, if that makes sense.
Totally.
And restless both physically and mentally, but probably more mentally, I'd say. That might be even 4. But yeah. So that's the scores that I gave myself.
Superb. Thank you. Yeah, super interesting. What you were saying about, you observe the relationship between food, eating, and your mind. Sloth and torpor, and actually other states, because it's remarkable, really, how much the Buddha talks about eating and moderation in eating as an essential, literally like an essential path factor, which we'll talk about at some on one of the other sessions. But yes, that's very, very, very well noticed, because that's just a huge thing.
Yeah, interestingly, I did consciously make an effort for about 6 weeks in December, over November, December, and I saw a clear increase in the clarity of my mind and efficiency, for example, at work, which is related to what I eat and how much I eat.
Superb.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Wonderful. Shaina, I'm pronouncing your name right, am I? Are you unmuting yourself?
Yeah, I'm just, it's my husband's name anyhow. I found it a bit difficult. It's like Gihanta, I think sensual desire was the main one anyhow. But what I found difficult was, is it when I'm meditating, or is it when I'm just normal, when I'm not meditating? And I think there's differences in that. To me, sensual desire, I just think when I think about children, I forget everything, whether I'm meditating or whether I'm just normal. If somebody rings up, if they ring up, I'll just rush to the phone and I'll speak to them, drop everything. So that would be a 5. So the sight of it, I think, and here would be quite high. But if I take the children out of the equation, and I don't know how you could do that, if you take the children out of the equation, I think I could probably live, I'm probably mid, I think, on the other ones anyway. I think I could probably do better on those ones. So I'm not, if you take the children out of the equation, I think I should be okay on that. The illusions and aversions, again, it's the situation. I think sometimes I'm quick to anger, but then I'll come off very quickly as well. And then I'm not quite slow to anger, but I'll forget it things quickly as well. So I think I'm okay on that one, probably mid. Alert of mind, I think I'm good at that. I'm generally, I am alert. But probably if I'm say 9 o'clock in the night or something like that, I probably won't be. So to me, I think the difficulty I found was when do we actually talk about these things anyhow? So I think if I'm meditating, I probably will be alert. If you're just talking about general life, then maybe not that alert. Doubt sometimes, but when I say doubt, it's the example you gave. Like I'm trying to meditate, for instance, and then it's not working. I'm just doing the breathing anapanasati, and it's just like not working. So I think, okay, do the metta, because then you'll calm your mind anyhow, and then that doesn't come as well. So there is doubt then, and then sometimes, yeah. So that's the doubt I have. But again, it depends on the circumstances. Sometimes I may be fully alert, shall I just say, and then I won't have the doubt. So I don't know. So that's what I'm just saying. I'm in some ways, what, when you're talking about hindrances, are you talking about when you're meditating, or is it like you should do it every day of your life, or how do you talk about it?
Good question. Both. So yeah, the hindrances, if you think about what they are, they're these forces of mind that obstruct clear seeing and actually dictate an incredible amount of our behavior. And they arise whether we're sitting down cross-legged with our eyes closed, attempting to focus on the breath, or whether we're walking around at work, at home with the children, cooking, whatever. Things always arise in the mind. And when there isn't mindfulness and other wholesome qualities of mind, which we're going to talk about, which are the factors of awakening, when those aren't there, the hindrances basically dominate the mind. So yeah, so that they're always affecting us is the short answer.
So basically, say if we talk about illusion, ill will. So when I'm working, just say I'm running to somebody and somebody says something and I get angry on that. But I should then say, oh, hang on a second, that's a hindrance. I shouldn't be getting angry. So you mindfully then bring it down. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things we're going to be speaking about a little bit today, and certainly a lot in following sessions, is that the Buddha says the number one thing that causes the hindrances is paying unwise attention. So to take the example that you just gave, right? So somebody says something that is an annoyance comes up in the mind. When we let the mind pay attention to it, so for example, whatever annoying thing they said keeps whirring around in our mind, and so rather than bringing mindfulness to it, and it's like, oh, this is just an annoyed thought. That's all that it is. But the mind's really paying attention to the story that's spinning in the mind. Is unwise attention, and that feeds the hindrance. And it's true of all of the hindrances. They all come from some form of unwise attention. Does that make sense? Yes,
thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Even the small number of you have got your videos, and I can't actually see everybody's face. So I didn't, so Shaina, so I don't actually know your name. So Shaina, because on the screen, I can't describe to you what I've got on my screen, but I can't actually see your face very clearly. Is Shaina actually? Did you say that was your husband's name, or that's actually you?
It's my husband's name. I'm using his computer. That's why I can't get stuck on mine. So that's his name actually. Mine. I'm Deepani, like Yanda said, but it probably won't come up in these sessions.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Good. Yeah.
I don't know how to put the hand, Gihanta.
Oh, that's the hand. Raise hand icon at the bottom.
How do I do that?
Right. There is. It says raise hand. So at the bottom, on the bottom of your screen, it'll say on the right hand side, there are 4 different symbols: chat, share screen, and then raise hand. It's okay. We know it. Yeah.
You know that I want to speak.
Great. You said so. So you can go next.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
I
Yes,
just
please.
yeah, thank
And
you.
also, thank you. Yeah, if you could do me a favor, just everybody, just because I can't, like I said, I can't actually see everybody. Even if you've got your camera on, if you could just tell me your name when you start speaking, that'd be great, please.
Hiranti De Silva. I had mine.
Kirampi.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Please.
I also was a bit confused that whether these factors apply when I'm not meditating or when I'm meditating.
Yes. So yeah, the same answer as I said to Deepani. Yes, they affect us all the time, especially
All the time.
especially when we're not bringing mindfulness.
Yes, yeah.
Forth. Yes.
So therefore, if one is mindful throughout the day, 24 hours, or when, then you are doing, if you are having these nearness, then that's not on, is it? Is what will play on when you're meditating? Is that what you're saying?
That's a very good question. When the mindfulness is really, really strong, is really clear, is really sharp, then the hindrances don't arise. But that's, you need a lot of samadhi for that, a lot. So generally speaking, like even when we're meditating, and even when we have quite strong samadhi, even then sometimes the hindrances will arise, not necessarily strongly, but they will arise a little bit, like kind of like a bubble arising to the surface. But if the mindfulness is relatively strong, it'll see the hindrance arise, and it will see what it is, and it'll let go. You'll see it. You'll see, like, it's almost like a bubble that kind of comes, and there's mindfulness of the thought, and then it sort of pops. But as I said, it needs quite a lot of continuity of mindfulness to actually be able to see that. I mean, it's interesting that the hindrances are actually, the Buddha actually names them in the 4 foundations of mindfulness. If you look at the 4th foundation of mindfulness, the hindrances appear there. Why? Because they too are to be brought mindfulness to. So the Buddha said, when let's say desire arises, sensual desire, kamachanda. So the practice is to see it arise, and to see its origin. So also to see its cause, to see it arise, and then to see its disappearance. So it's not like when they arise, oh my goodness, my practice is not going well. They're part and parcel of the practice, and they will keep arising even very, very advanced stages of the practice. So that's why understanding them and seeing them and training the mind to actually observe them and know what they are is so important, because when they're not seen, they basically take over the mind. You know what it's like when you get lost in thought. Whether you're sitting on the cushion or you're in daily life, but let's say a thought of desire for the park around the corner arises, and the mind's just thinking, that park's so nice, and there's that bird I saw the other day, and there was that dog that was running around. So basically the mind is lost in this thought. Why is it lost? Because it's not being seen, because the mindfulness is not strong enough to see, this is just a thought. It's just a thought of desire. That's all that it is. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. So throughout the day, you need to be mindful in order to catch these things. But having seen that will be a good thing rather than not realizing it.
Exactly. Yeah, beautifully said. And yeah, so when you practice mindfulness throughout the day, what you'll see, what the mind will start to observe, is hindrances arising and passing away all the time.
So as long as you observe that will be being mindful, isn't it?
Correct. That's your practice.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you do that diligently enough, you'll work your way all the way to liberation. It's that powerful.
And also you are being wise, isn't it? Wisdom.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you think, so the Buddha said, if you remember that quote that I gave at the beginning, where the Buddha is saying, who is a foolish person one who is not paying attention to the awakening factors. So in other words, what are they paying attention to? The hindrances. They're just allowing the hindrances to run the mind, as distinct from bringing mindfulness, which happens to be the first of the awakening factors. So that person is wise, because you're actually you're awakening the mind. It's like, oh, that's what's going on. It's just a thought. It's just a thought of desire. That's all that it is. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that describes very well, really. So Kamachanda then must be what I have now realized. But at the same time, I have a little problem where I have to keep my weight to a certain level. So therefore, I have been instructed to eat. Not continuously.
You're not the only one.
Yeah. No, but rather than cutting down, I have been asked to, make sure my weight is sustained. So therefore, I take that. I don't know where to draw the line, if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Because the doctor's advice is not to let your weight go down.
Oh, I see. So he's worried about you being underweight. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so therefore, I have to do that. And I need to balance it in such a manner. I don't normally think of food when I'm meditating, but out of meditation, I tend to think because of sometimes I'm hungry, sometimes due to this medical advice.
I understand.
Yeah, so that's it. And also ill will sometimes when I have some, when I don't like something, if somebody does it like to annoy me or anything, then I will get angry. Then at once, nowadays, I realize it and I said, this is anger. So I'll get back to it, but it does come up. Slot and over. That is actually sleepiness during meditation.
It certainly includes that, yeah, and it can include it in your daily life as well. Just that sense of drowsiness, that sense of sluggishness. It can include like you, for example, let's say that going for a gentle walk is good for you, but you're sitting on the sofa and you're like, I can't be bothered. That's sloth and torpor.
No, I'm not like that. Mind. I'm very energetic and, wake other people as well. No, I don't agree with that. Okay. Then the restlessness and remorse, which is uddacha kukucha. What actually you mean? Are you worried about what you have done wrong, or is that what?
It includes that, yeah. So the remorse side of it, the regret side of it, as Anu was sharing, is when you think back to things.
Oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, or that you wish you had done. So that's the remorse side, and it's usually related to sila. Like for example, if we spoke angrily to somebody.
Yes,
and the thought comes up and it's like, oh, I really wish I hadn't done that. I really wish I'd stayed calmer. So that would be an example of kukucha.
Yeah, I do tend to do that sometimes, but having done that, I do regret as well. I wish I was more thoughtful. How one can avoid that, I wonder.
Excellent question. So one part of it is being very mindful about our sila, basically. So if we take the four aspects of right speech, right? So just being very mindful. Am I telling the truth? Is what I'm saying actually accurate? And then am I not speaking divisively? In fact, am I doing the opposite? Am I saying good things about people? So I'm not kind of going around saying, oh, John round the corner, he's such a pain, so undermining people. So just kind of watching your speech and trying to speak words that are actually uniting people. or the third aspect of right speech, which is speaking gently, not harshly. Right, so being mindful about that, so even when we're upset about something, just keeping the voice and keeping the words that we speak not angry. Or the fourth one, idle chatter. So just like kind of not gossiping. So where there's mindfulness about that, about our speech, so our speech is true, our speech is speech that creates harmony, our speech is gentle, our speech is timely and is factual and is not just gossipy. When we do that, then there's no regret, there's no remorse in the mind about our speech, as an example. And the same is true for our bodily conduct too. So if you think about the first precept, right, not to harm. So that if we break that precept and a fly comes in and starts buzzing around our head, and rather than just capturing it and letting it out of the window, we get a book and we whack it and kill it. That thought then may arise later in the day. Oh my goodness, I wish I hadn't done that. There was just a fly, I just could have taken him outside. That sort of thing. So when we're very, very diligent about our sila, then remorse tends not to arise in the mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, even though somebody has done something wrong, I should be tactful in
yes,
addressing that. Is that what you mean?
Correct. Yes. So the Buddha actually gave very specific guidance on this. So he said anything that we say should have five characteristics, and if it doesn't have all 5 of these, then don't say it. So is what we're about to say true? Is it true? Is it useful? So is it beneficial? Is it beneficial for the relationship? Is it beneficial for the other person? Is it timely? So for example, if the other person's really angry or really upset, sometimes it's just not timely to talk to them. And are we speaking gently? And are we speaking it from a heart of loving kindness, from a metaphor heart? So if we can answer yes to all 5 of those, then we should speak. But if one of those is missing, then just to stay silent.
Okay, yeah. So one needs to ascertain all that in order to
Exactly, and that's where the mindfulness comes in.
Okay.
Because if we're watching our mind and we see that the mind is upset, and the mindfulness also helps us to remember the Buddha's guidance. For example, what I just shared with you, because that's the Buddha's guidance. So that's the mindfulness, because mindfulness also has the quality of remembering, of recollecting the teachings. So when there's mindfulness, we remember these things, and then that guides our behavior, and we can act wisely and not unwisely.
Okay, thank you. That's kind. And then the doubt. Is it doubt about the Dhamma?
Can be. Yeah, it's like, is this that I've learned? Have I learned this correctly? Did I hear this correctly? And sometimes it's actually legitimate doubt. Like it could be that we've actually misremembered something, or I think it was with Deepanese in one of the earlier conversations where, you start to do anapanasati and then you're thinking, oh my gosh, maybe I should do metta instead. Maybe that'd be a more suitable subject. Sometimes that's actually legitimate. Sometimes actually we do need to alter the tactics that we're using. But the kind of doubt that the Buddha is talking about isn't that kind of doubt. He's talking about like a doubt where we actually stop trying. We stop being mindful. We just kind of go, oh, I can't be bothered with this because I just don't think it's right. So I'm not going to try to be mindful. I'm not going to try to purify my heart because I just, that kind of doubt.
Oh, I see. Doubt about the Dhamma, is it?
Doubt about the Dhamma, doubt about the Buddha, the teacher, doubt about the Sangha, and doubt about yourself, your ability to do it, doubt about the whole training. That kind of doubt, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so that's my wish. Thank you.
Fantastic. You're so welcome. Right. I think Gianti may better help me because on my screen I can't see.
I think Mihiri had her hand up as well at one point. She's put it down now, but she did have her hand up.
Oh, Mihiri, are you still able to share? I'd love to hear it.
I'm still able to share, yes.
Fantastic.
So for me, sensual desire, it was, I think, about a 4 or a 5 for food, like for sweet food. I think this is my ongoing kind of work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And irritation, I mean, I am for anger and irritation. I actually put myself as a 4 initially, but after you talked about the 4 types of snakes, the first, I would say I'm quick to get irritated, but it kind of goes, and especially now because I've been working on it so much over the years, I think it's now I'm able to catch it at a much earlier stage. I can actually see it arising even almost before it arises.
Wow.
So it's really quite good, much better. Not all the time, but so I think I've gone better on that one. Sloths and torpor, I think I'm like in the middle somewhere, because sometimes I do, even when I'm meditating, I do have this occasional sleepiness. But generally in life, I would say I don't have sloth and torpor. But again, worked very hard towards not having it, and really worked a lot around it. I used to fall asleep quite easily in meditation, but not so much now.
Right.
And yeah, restlessness, I would say I'm kind of somewhere in, I would say a 3 or something like that. Mind goes sometimes all over the show, and you're like, okay, I can feel the agitation, I can feel the restlessness. And mind is quite restless. In fact, it's quite interesting to watch the restlessness. I actually can catch the restlessness and have to work then towards trying to not have the restlessness. Remorse, not so much. I try very much to stay in the moment. So I'm much less. Mind doesn't nowadays go so much to the past or to the future. It's more in the present, I would say, a lot of the time. But definitely the restlessness comes up, as it does. So, as you said, right to the end, it'll keep coming. So, yes. So that's that. And doubt, I think better now with the doubt. I think I'm more not so doubtful as I was in the past. So I think the big work for me is in the first 2, and the restlessness is the 3, which I really will have to put a lot of effort into.
Got it.
Or continue to put a lot of effort into, I should say.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mihiri, very much. Let's see, Yasastri. Am I seeing a hand up? Yes, I think so. Yes, Yasastri?
Hello, Paul. It's actually Tushan. My son wants to ask a question. Is that all right?
Of course.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, good evening, Paul. Good evening, everyone.
Hi,
It's been very interesting to listen to this. I had a question about the 5th hindrance, which was doubt. If I may be wrong about this, and my recollection may be slightly rusty, but I know Lord Buddha said something somewhere at some time about if he had ever been incorrect or vague about a certain concept, that you could sort of question it, or you could, yeah, I guess that's the only way to put it, question it. But the only way you would be able to do that is if you originated from a place of doubt about whatever concept you're questioning. I just wondered how you reconcile kind of those 2 things. So being able to question something within Buddhism and having doubt about the Buddhism as well.
Great question. Yeah, no, absolutely. That the Buddha said, and then, you're probably familiar, almost everybody's familiar with the sutta to the Kalamas, which is this whole question of really exploring the Dhamma, not through blind faith, but through bright faith, bright confidence. So So the distinction here is, rather than like blindly believing, it's actually it's a confidence, sufficient confidence that sufficient confidence in the Buddha and what he's saying, that you are actually willing to look for yourself. Because in order to actually understand and see what he's talking about requires effort, and you actually have to look. You know, so in the same way as if somebody said to you, you know, Tushan, like over that mountain over there, you know, you see that huge mountain over there. On the other side of that mountain is a pot of gold like you would not believe. I promise you, it's there. If you just kind of sit like crossed armed, like, yeah, I don't believe it, so I'm not even going to look because I just don't believe you. You'll never know, right? So in order to find out whether what that person's saying is true, you would actually have to go and climb the mountain and look for yourself, right? It's the same with the Dhamma. You've actually got to look for yourself. You know, so the Buddha said, you may have, if you've ever read the Parinibbana Sutta, you know, the very last discourse that he gave, he says towards the end that a Buddha is one who points the way. So a Buddha can't do the work for us. You know, even with all of the incredible powers of a Buddha, they can't liberate any of us by themselves. What they can do is say, if you look there, if you walk that path, if you go in that direction, this is what will happen. You'll see this, you'll see that, things will happen. And then it's up to us whether we actually make the effort or not. And that requires a degree of confidence that what the Buddha is saying is true, or that there's truth in you know, that his claims about himself and his claims about what he saw, that there may be truth in that, sufficient that we're actually willing to look for ourselves. And one of the beauties of the Dhamma is that the more we look, the more we see. You know, so in this particular case with the hindrances, the more we develop the heart and mind, the less the hindrances have a grip on the mind. And the more the awakening factors, which we are going to get onto at some point, the more the awakening factors get strong. And so the brighter the mind gets and the less dark the mind gets, the more it actually sees, the more unobstructed it is. So it's a little bit like in a room. You've probably had this experience, you know, if you walk into a dark room and rather than like an on-off light switch, you have a dimmer switch. So you put the light on at the lowest dimming, at the lowest setting for the dimmer. So it's just a little bit of light. But when you do that, it's like, oh, wow, I can actually see a little bit in this room. You can start to see some of the shapes, right? Now imagine you very, very, very slowly turn up the dimmer switch. And the more you turn that switch, the more you can see, the more the shapes become clearer and clearer. So you start to be able to see not just vague shapes, but distinct shapes. And then you turn the light up a bit further, you start to be able to see colors. You turn it up a little bit further and you start to see details, you know, details of the different ornaments. And you turn it up all the way and you can see the full detail of the room, including what's clean, what's dirty, what's beautiful, what's not, right? You can see everything. The practice is really exactly the same. You know, so the more we're willing to actually look and see and apply ourselves to the practice, the more we see. So, you know, so in answer to your question, it is absolutely legitimate to, with any aspect of the Dhamma, to inquire, is this so or not? And then to actually make the effort to actually look. You know, and it's a little bit like, you know, in the same way as a scientist does. You know, when you're at school and you learn scientific principles, you know, and so you can listen to the physics teacher saying, well, you know, Tushan, well, force equals mass times acceleration, you know, Newton's second law. And you can just sit there and go, okay, yeah, whatever, right? Or you can actually do an experiment for yourself and see whether that's actually true. You know, is it true that when the mass, let's take a car, is it true that if you increase the mass of the car and the car goes faster, that when it hits a wall, it's going to hit it with more force? Is that really true? Right? So you can see for yourself, you can replicate the experiment for yourself. And the Dhamma is exactly the same. You know, if you replicate the experiment, which is basically to practice in the way that the Buddha said, you'll see for yourself whether it's true. You don't have to blindly believe. And in fact, the Buddha said, explicitly said, don't just believe what I said. Actually practice for yourself. You need to practice for yourself. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much, Paul.
You're so welcome. So welcome. I'm going to go and get my charger because I've got 5% on this iPad. It's going down alarmingly fast, and I don't want to lose you all in the next few minutes. Just give me 1 minute, please. If you need to take a bathroom break or anything, anybody, let's do that. Actually, let's take a 2-minute break, and we'll resume then. Okay. Right. About that. I believe we're back in action. I'm down to 3% on my iPad. That was a pretty close call. I think it's charging.
Is it charging now, Paul?
I think so. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. All right. Fantastic. So we've talked about and we've started to do some diagnosis on our own hearts and minds in terms of what's obstructing our minds, what is preventing us from seeing how things actually are, which is really the entire practice. So the Buddha says when the actual phrase, the Pali is jnana dasana, which is knowledge and vision. So really what he's saying is when there's deep understanding and seeing of how things are, then the heart and mind doesn't cling. It doesn't grasp because it sees its nature. So when it sees that things are impermanent, it doesn't grasp. So grasping comes from not seeing how things are. Attachment comes from not seeing how things are. So it comes from a blindness of the mind. It comes from ignorance, simply not knowing. And so the awakening factors are what allow us to actually see. They're what allow us to actually know how things are. And when we see how things are, automatically, without us trying, just automatically, there's letting go. So the awakening factors actually counteract each of the 5 hindrances. And when we really bring the 7 awakening factors, when we really cultivate them, the hindrances get weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. So many of you will know, or you'll have heard what they are. So we're just going to do, like, first of all, just a brief overview of what they are as a little introduction to them today. And then over the course of the year, each month, we're going to focus on a particular one and talk about how it works. Okay, so in your Dharma diary, if you could, on a new page, this new page is going to be called the 7 awakening factors. So Bojjhanga, the Pali word Bojjhanga, awakening factor. So it's actually a compound of 2 words. So Pali, as you may know, lots of words in Pali are basically combinations of 2 words. So Bojjhanga is basically a combination of Bodhi and Anga. So Bodhi is it's related to Bud, actually, which is awake. So the first part of Bojjhanga, Bodhi, is awake. And then the Anga is like a factor or a cause of something. So these are the factors, the causes of awakening. So that's kind of a big deal, right? You know, these things that actually cause awakening, they lead to awakening. Okay, so the very first one, as you'll be unsurprised to learn, given everything we've just been talking about, is actually sati. It's actually mindfulness. And the Buddha said about this, you know, when he's talking about the awakening factors, that sati mindfulness is always, 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 always useful. You can't have too much mindfulness. You can't be too mindful. And actually, it acts as a restraint for all of the hindrances. So when you really spend your time cultivating mindfulness, cultivating sati, you will see all of the hindrances get weaker. And there's lots of beautiful ways in which sati works, which we're going to talk about in future sessions. But really, it has that. It's almost like a kind of like a guardian of the mind, like a protector of the mind. And it's so powerful, and it has so many aspects to it. So it's kind of like it's kind of like the sort of guardian, the guardian angel of the mind, if you can think about it like that. So sati. Now, when we really develop sati, then the second awakening factor then starts to arise just naturally by itself. So these actually start to unfold by themselves, because the second awakening factor is, it depends how you translate it, but it's usually translated as like investigation. So the Pali is Dhammavichaya, which kind of means investigation of how things are, investigation of Dhamma. So really, yeah, investigation of what's so. So this aspect, this particular awakening factor, is like the wisdom aspect, the wisdom awakening factor. And the Buddha says that this particular factor really counteracts doubt. You know, so some of you mentioned doubt, in your sharing. So when we investigate things with the mind, doubts become addressed, you know, because we're actually looking, we're actually discerning, okay, what is this exactly? So, and then as we do that, very, very deep truths about the way things are, particularly the profound impermanence of everything in life, start to become revealed. And so it comes through this investigation. Okay, now, when we start to investigate things, you know, and apply that Dhammavichaya, that investigation, then the next awakening factor, which is effort, virya, then starts to become aroused, because through the investigation, we start to see the nature of things, and we start to see the nature of our own heart and mind, and we start to see the nature of how our mind looks and feels when it's cloudy and dusty and dirty, you know, when it's unwholesome, and how it feels and how it's how we experience it when it's clean, when it's pure. And so we feel more and more motivated to actually clean and purify the heart. So that's the virya, because we start to feel the happiness of the Dhamma, the purer the heart is, the more the happier we feel. So it's really a beautiful thing. So wow, there's like an inspiration to clean the heart, and mind. What happens with that cleaning is the next awakening factor, which is joy. Very, very interestingly, piti in Pali, joy. So the cleaner the heart is, the more beautiful our heart is, the more joy arises. And this joy it's a spiritual joy. It's not the same joy as like we think we go into Sainsbury's and we see our favorite chocolate cake and it's like, oh yeah, it's not that kind of joy. This is a spiritual joy, niramisa. So it's not dependent on the sense basis, and it's a very beautiful experience. Those of you who experience that sort of rapture, that joy in the practice, and there are different types of joy which we're going to talk about in one of the later sessions. But one of the, in terms of the hindrances, that one of the hindrances that it counteracts, interestingly, is ill will. When there's joy in the mind, ill will can't arise. Super interesting, eh? Okay, so when there's joy in the heart and mind, when it's arising, what does that do? It calms. It brings forth the next awakening factor, which is calmness, tranquility, in Pali passaddhi. So it calms the mind and it calms the body. So it's that lovely feeling, just where just the agitation just subsides and the restlessness subsides. It's a very beautiful and actually rare feeling, and it's we rarely go through life where there's just no agitation, there's no restlessness in the mind and in the body. Okay, so when tranquility starts to arise in the body and the mind, happiness arises, sukha, and that then creates and conditions the next awakening factor, which is samadhi, unity of mind, composure of mind. As you know, it's often translated to concentration, which is in some ways not a great translation, but it has that quality of undistractedness. And the Buddha said, when the samadhi, when the mind is unified, when it's composed, sensual desire, kamachanda, fades away. Which is pretty interesting, isn't it? If you think about that. So the factor which counteracts desire is actually a unified mind. Okay, and then this last one, then the samadhi, then conditions the last of the 7 awakening factors, which is upekkha, equanimity. And a little bit like sati, a little bit like mindfulness, upekkha counteracts all of the hindrances, particularly restlessness, particularly ill will, though actually all of them. And it has a beautiful quality of balance. The heart and mind is balanced, and it just sees whatever arises, whether it's pleasure or it's painful, without reacting to it, without getting caught by it. So when there's pleasure arising, the heart and mind isn't pulled, isn't drawn towards it, and it doesn't get attached to it. And then when it changes to something unpleasant, it doesn't react with aversion to it. So it has it's actually a very beautiful quality, and it makes sure that there's just enough of the right qualities of mind to really keep it stable and to keep it beautiful, to keep it non-reactive. So those are the 7 factors of awakening. And many, if not all of you, will have experienced these factors in some shape or form in your practice. Sorry, one sec. So even though, interestingly, even though I've actually got this thing charged up.
Paul, I think you're muted. We can't hear you.
Okay, is that better? Let me just get off this call here.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, we were hearing you double, but that's good.
Yeah, no, I had 2 devices on. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah, it was weird. I had it charging up, but it was drawing so much power, it was still.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah,
okay.
It was still actually. I was down to 1%.
Oh dear. Right.
Right. Anyway, I'm back. So, what we're going to be talking about really over the next, over the course of this year, really, is we're going to go through the factors one by one, and we're going to talk about how to bring them forth and develop them, and we're going to talk about in more and more detail how they actually interrelate. So one of the ways they relate is that they sort of like dominoes, the classic game of dominoes. You hit one domino, and then that knocks the next one down, and the next one, and the next one. That you get that effect with the awakening factors. So if you start with mindfulness, if you start by being mindful, being really mindful, the other ones naturally unfold, which is really great. So in some ways, if you are diligently mindful, everything will come from that. The entire practice will really unfold, and we'll talk about how to do that. So this is like a brief introduction to the awakening factors, and crucially their importance, and why we should pay a lot of attention, like really a lot of attention to them, knowing what they are, knowing how they work, knowing how to develop them, and understanding that it's by really developing these that the hindrances that we talked about will get weaker and weaker and weaker. So by really developing them, we get happier and happier and happier, which is pretty great, right? I mean, it's like it's the formula for happiness. So if we really devote ourselves to these 7 qualities, just on a day-to-day basis, our life is going to get better, a lot better, like really a lot better. Our relationships will get better. How we, our relationship, and not just our relationships with other people, but our relationship with food, our relationship with our body, our relationship with our health. All of these things will get better. Why? Because our heart and mind will get healthier and healthier, purer and purer, brighter and brighter, clearer and clearer, wiser and wiser. So it's like a beautiful kind of upward flowering, if that makes sense, of goodness, of freedom, ultimately. So it's really extraordinarily powerful. So I'm mindful that we have 10 minutes, and what I'd love to do is a little bit of meditation. And so we're going to do a little bit of metta. And there's actually a wonderful discourse, some of you may know it, in the Samyutta Nikaya, where the Buddha specifically refers to metta, and actually all 4 of the Brahma Viharas, and their relationship to the awakening factors. So when you develop metta, you're automatically developing the awakening factors, which is wonderful. you know, because all of you know the metta practice. So if you think about that, every time you sit down to do that, the awakening factors are getting stronger. So we're going to do a little metta, and if we have a few minutes at the end, which we won't have a lot, but we can just do a little bit of any final questions. Okay. Wonderful. So wherever you are, you can do this either open eyes or closed eyes, whichever you prefer. Do this closed eyes, just gently allowing them to close. We're going to start just by relaxing. Just relaxing. Relaxing the body. Just bringing awareness to the body. And just noticing very gently if there's any tension build up anywhere. If it helps, just to adjust the posture, a nice comfortable posture. Actually, in doing so, just noting that bringing attention to the body in this way, taking care of the body in this way, is actually an act of metta towards ourselves. So often we go through our lives, go through our days, just not really paying attention to our bodies, just being very gentle, caring towards our body. So knowing that these bodies that we have, the more we care for them, the more we can allow ourselves to care for them, the more able they are to support us as we go through our days. So just taking this time to very gently, kindly, just allow the breath to get a little bit slower, a little bit deeper. And knowing that in that slower, deeper breath, that's nurturing the body. It's calming. It's allowing our heart to beat a little less quickly. It's reducing the strain. It's lessening the strain. Every part of the body. So we're being kind to ourselves, relaxing the body. Just bringing awareness to the head, face, just gently allowing any lingering tension or any other holding on, just to let go. Muscles, the face, to relax. Bringing that relaxed, gentle, letterful awareness down through the neck and into the shoulders. So often we store unseen tensions. Just to relax the shoulders. Softness, feeling gentleness. Bringing that down through the arms, all the way down to the hands and the fingers. Gentle, metaful awareness. Bringing it down also to the chest, the back, the upper back, down to the lower back, the abdomen. Just wishing ourselves gentle, calm peace throughout the body, tranquility in the body. Down also into the hips, into the legs. There's so much burden through our days, carrying us around everywhere we go. It's a feeling, sense of gratitude. Gratitude towards our body that it sustains us, even though sometimes it gets sick. Just knowing that the body works hard. Or we can be gentle towards it. We can nurture its health. Sustain our well-being. Down through our knees and the lower legs and into the feet. Just feeling beautiful, kind, gentleness pervade the whole body. Wishing ourselves well. Wishing ourselves safety, security, happiness, freedom from the many anxieties that sometimes afflict us. Freedom from anxiety, freedom from suffering. And knowing that this kindness, this metta, this compassion towards us, as well as giving ourselves ease, ourselves freedom, also allows us to act as a beacon for others, those around us, as they too begin to feel that gentleness, that love, kindness in us. And so we're giving everybody around us a gift, a wonderful gift, by bringing this beautifulness, this kindness forward. You can know that it means that our thoughts are kinder and more beautiful, and our words of speech lovely. Our bodily actions too, gentle, generous towards others as to ourselves. And knowing that actually everybody around us, everybody that we know, the countless beings that we don't know and never will know, all beings everywhere of all kinds, the powerful, those who are not powerful, rich and the poor, everybody in between, the male or female, young or old, all beings ultimately wish for the same thing, to not suffer, to have peace. Understanding that different beings, different humans, different other beings have different understanding, different levels of wisdom as to what is actually going to achieve that. So knowing that when people act unwisely, it's because they don't know. because there's ignorance in the mind. Mind's obstructing them. Knowing that we can extend loving kindness, compassion towards them. Understanding why they're doing what they're doing. Understanding that their minds are obstructed. Through this wonderful practice of metta karuna, of loving kindness and compassion, we ourselves can free our own hearts, purify our own hearts. This wonderful Dhamma. To reflect just how rare it is to have this Dhamma. Blessed we are. We have this. We have the Buddha's teachings. Just now, just dropping into the heart, the intention between now, through the days that follow today. You can allow each day to be a day of metta. Starting with ourselves and radiating out, everybody around us. So that our days are days of being kind and gentle and caring towards ourselves, towards everybody around us. Thoughts, our words, in all of our actions. Knowing that by doing this, leading a good life, pure life, a life that makes a difference, a life that is a real beacon, wisdom and purity. The world needs it so much. Knowing that this gives our lives purpose. That our time matters. Walking the path to freedom. Purifying ourselves. In your own time, your eyes are closed. You can gently allow them to open. Just bring your attention back into the room. Wonderful. I'm mindful that we have got to the end of our allotted time. Firstly, I'd really like to thank you all so much for joining. It's been a beautiful time with you. Very appreciative spending this time with you. Before we finish, does anybody have any final questions? Be relating to anything we've spoken about, or?
Yeah, Paul, I do have a question, but I think possibly we'll keep it till next time. I mean, the question was, what was the difference between Piti and Passaddhi, or the difference between joy and tranquility, because they seem to be in the same realm, but I think we can explore that maybe in future sessions.
Sure. Absolutely, yeah. No, it's a great question, and yeah, much to say about that. Perhaps if you wouldn't mind noting it down in your Dhamma diary.
Yes, I have.
Fantastic. Anybody else?
I thought there were some of them which is it comes in the Eightfold Paths, some of the stuff. like sati, samadhi. Some
Yeah.
of them come in the Eightfold Path, but like you said, we could explore it later. Effort, all those things. Vinya is in the Eightfold Path.
Definitely. That's a very good observation. In fact, the Buddha in the Parinibbana Sutta, he said he actually gave 37 factors of awakening, what's known as the Bodhi Magga, which includes the 7 factors of awakening that we're talking about. It includes the Eightfold Path. It includes several other sets of Dhamma, and all of them together all contribute to the path. And as you just said, almost all of them appear several times. So of those 37, there are actually 14 separate ones. And some of them, for example, Virya, effort, appears 8 times, I think, out of the 37. Sati, I think, appears 4 times, Virya, Samadhi quite a few times. So yes, you're absolutely right. In each of them, the function is a little bit different, and we'll talk about that, during the sessions. But that's a great observation, what you just said. Fantastic. Any other final thoughts? Wonderful. So, just as a very final reflection, is what I just mentioned a little bit earlier, which is what the Buddha said, which is, in order to actually get the fruits of the practice, we actually have to do it. And so the more we can apply ourselves to the practice literally in every moment of each day, simply at this point, just by bringing forth mindfulness, just mindfulness of what we're doing. So if we're walking along, mindfulness of walking. If you're doing the dishes, there's an awareness, there's mindfulness of doing the dishes. If you're lying down in bed, there's an awareness of that, there's a mindfulness of lying down. So you're bringing that awareness, you're bringing that awareness to every single thing that you do. It's that practice of knowing what you're doing. And that in itself will bring forth the sati. And that in itself will actually bring forth and strengthen all of the other awakening factors, as we'll talk about. But it all starts with sati, mindfulness, with awareness. So my suggestion is at the beginning of each day, when you wake up, when you feel yourself awake and you open your eyes, that's where it starts. That's where the awareness starts. And just bringing that awareness to as much as you can to every single thing that you do during the day. And I promise you'll be astonished at the results. You'll feel the Dhamma unfold, even in your daily lives, as you go through all of the busyness that so many of you have in your lives, with your children, at work, all of the other stuff that goes towards being a layperson. You can actually use every activity as part of your awakening. Literally every single thing, without exception. Brushing your teeth, getting dressed, talking to your colleagues at work, helping your children with their homework, hoovering the rooms, cooking, you name it. Everything you can bring awareness to. Everything. Wonderful. Bless you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Okay. So before we close, I think let us give our thanks to Paul for the amazingly insightful sharing today about the 7 factors of awakening. Hopefully this will awaken our entire year. and there's so much to explore. You talked about Dhamma Vichaya, so there's a lot to investigate, and I hope everyone who has joined today will continue to journey with us for the remaining months of the year, because we will explore each factor every month. The next Bodhi Magga session is on the first Friday of February, which is February 7th. Paul mentioned a Dhamma diary, but also diarize the date as well. So we will reconvene on the 7th. And your closing thoughts, Paul, were around the importance of mindfulness, and that will be the topic we will talk about in February, which is sati. which is the all-important beginning awakening factor, which leads to the other ones. One of the really interesting things, Paul, also that you mentioned today, and I'm very grateful, is how you talked about the sequential aspect of the awakening factors, which I wasn't aware of. You know, how one thing leads to another. We often talk about the 5 hindrances also as something you have to notice and maybe subside and reduce over time. But you mentioned today how actually the 7 awakening factors themselves lead to the reduction of those hindrances. So it's not just about noticing hindrances and saying, oh, okay, well, you know, I need to do better, but actually you can cultivate these awakening factors and they themselves will lead to a cessation or reduction of the hindrances. So lots of very interesting insights. So thank you so much, Paul. And you explained all of this in a very sort of practical and simple way that we can understand. My thanks also to everybody else who has joined today, taking your time away from a you know, after a long week to come here today, spending your Friday evening with us. So continue to join our sessions and continue this journey. I will close the Bodhi Magga session today with our closing verse, which I will play right now, and then we close the session. The recording of this session also will be available for 30 days on the Skype chat, so please make note of that as well.
Arogya Paramalabha Santutti Paramam Dhanam Vissasa Paramayati Nibbanam Paramam Sukham.
Thank you, everybody, and hope to see you next month. Take care.
Sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.